Alright, here's the second half of 8.4, talking about rectangles here. So we have example number 2. It says quadrilateral ABC is a rectangle. Find x and y. And you'll notice I did a little bit of editing here. That's because I got this question out of the book, but the information in the book was wrong. So cross off the -1 and just make that y squared, and cross off the 4y plus 4 and just make that 6y minus 5 for that angle and that angle. Now, how are we going to solve for x? Well, it says that this angle here is 9x plus 20, and this is 4x plus 5. But remember, they say that this is a rectangle. That means that these two angles have to add up to 90 degrees. So I can write, I'm going to zoom in, that 9x plus 20 and 4x plus 5 equals 90. Alright, well, this is pretty easy to solve. Just combine my like terms. 13x plus 25 equals 90. Subtract 25, subtract 25. We get 13x equals 65, and x equals 5. Boom. Alright, so that's how we get x. But now let's take a look at y, because y is going to be a little bit different, and we're going to do something that we probably haven't done since algebra. So let's take a look. First off, it's important that you see that this angle and this angle are alternate interiors of these two parallel lines with BD as a transversal. So these are alternate interior angles of parallel lines because it's a rectangle, so they're parallel. And if they are parallel, then that means alternate interior angles are congruent. So I'm going to come over here on the right, and I'm going to say y squared equals 6y minus 5. Now, we have not yet in geometry done problems with a square. We've done it. You've done it in algebra before, so it's not completely new, but we're going to have to take a look at this. So what we do is we want to get this whole thing equal to 0. So I'm going to subtract 6y and I'm going to add 5. So it's going to look like this. Y squared minus 6y plus 5 equals 0. So I get everything on one side and just set it equal to 0, because this is the easiest way to solve. Okay. Now what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to factor, and there's lots of different ways to factor. You guys have done lots of different ways, but I think your algebra teachers here at Buckingham teach you one main way with the star method. And so here's the star method whenever you don't have an a coefficient here. Right? What you do is you take your last term, 5, put it on top. You take your middle term, -6, put it on bottom. And now we need something that will multiply up to 5 and add up to -6. So what are some things that multiply up to 5? Well, 1 and 5 multiplies up to 5, right? But 1 plus 5 equals +6. Well, what if I was to do, let's change colors here. What if I was to do -1 and -5? Well, -1 times -5 is +5, because it's a negative times a negative. And -1 plus -5 is -6, so that works. So that means I can rewrite this equation, y squared minus 6y plus 5, as a factor of y minus 1 and y minus 5. And there we go. That's what the little... That's the way that they tell you to do it. There you go. So now we have this factor, y minus 1 times y minus 5. And if I was actually multiply this back out, I would get this equation back. So, and now I'm going to have to ask myself how I solve for this. Well, here's the idea, is cover up one of these two things, because isn't anything times 0 equal to 0? So, for example, if this y minus 5 equaled 0, it wouldn't matter what y minus 1 was. The whole thing would be 0. Or if y minus 1 equaled 0, it wouldn't matter what y minus 5 was. The whole thing would be 0. So, if y minus 1 is 0, it's all 0. So let's think, well, what would make this 0? Well, +1 would, right? If I put a 1 in for y, I'd get 1 minus 1. So, my solutions are y equals 1. What else would make it 0? Well, look at this one now. I got y minus 5. If I put in a 5, I'd have 5 minus 5, making this 0. 0 times whatever this is, the whole thing would be 0. So there's two solutions then make this 0, 1, and 5. Okay, hold on to that for a second, and let's zoom back in. We knew that x was 5. And some of you guys are thinking, well, couldn't I have just said, hey, these two things are equal? Yes, but I wanted to show you how to factor, so I did it the longer way. Now, we knew that x is 5, so if I was to plug in an x, I'd get 4 times 5, which is 20, plus 5, which is 25 degrees. And we didn't really go over this, but if you think about it, all of these two angles here should be congruent, just like these two angles here should be congruent. So this should actually be 25 degrees as well. Well, if that's 25 degrees and it's y squared, which one works? Does 1 work or does 5 work? Think about it. If you plug in a 1, 1 squared is just 1. Well, that's not 25 degrees. But 5 squared is 25. That works. So we can go over here, we can cross off the 1, because the 5 is the only real solution. So I'm going to write y equals 5, and x equals 5. They both equal 5. Alright, there we go. That's how we do a problem like that.